Hi, everyone, and welcome to our 40th anniversary season. I'm Daniel W. Boothe, the current music director and conductor of your symphony orchestra, Symphonicity, and we're going to be interviewing 40 different individuals this year who have made Symphonicity what it is today. And of course, we have to start with our founding maestro, our music director emeritus, David S. Kunkel, who is joining me this afternoon. Hi, David. Welcome.
Hello. Thank you. Good to be here.
It's so neat to have us, I think, both on the screen, David, because one of the unique things about this orchestra that you helped create 40 years ago is that it's only had two music directors. And you, of course, led for 35 of those years. And after a couple years of a search, I had the great fortune of winning the job. And now I get to follow in your footsteps. And here we both are on the screen during a very interesting time of the year with the pandemic and such, but we're having this opportunity to get to know each other even more and share our story with Symphonicity. So how are you and Pat doing with all things considered?
Oh, we're doing fine down here in the country. We're trying to be careful without being obsessive. We do go out occasionally, but carefully, and wear masks and are careful about keeping our hands clean and staying away from people. But I'm not going to stay cooped up.
Well, and to that point, I know that since you retired from the orchestra, you've maintained some activity as well as your continuation as music director there at First Presbyterian down on the ocean front. How are things going there and with the music making?
Well, the music making is fine if you don't care about singing of any kind. The organ playing is just fine, and the piano playing. And today for worship, we had a bell solo, a bell and piano duet, actually. We had Annika Jenkins, who the Symphonicity audience knows very well. She came and played, and I'm going to have her back. Had Amber Kidd come and play. I'm sure I'll have Amber back. So we try to do instrumental things, but without singing, it's really difficult. It's hard on everybody. It's hard on the people that aren't singers, just not to have it in the worship service. So we just hope this will pass pretty soon and we can get back to doing what we do.
I sure hope so. It sounds like you're having to improvise under the circumstances, and you're doing that with, it seems like a great roster of Symphonicity regulars from the orchestra. It's neat to see that still happening. And as you go back, David, to 1981, when this orchestra was forming, I'm sure there was a lot of improvising going on. Can you take us all the way back, if you can, remember those early days? How did this even happen? How did
you have no idea the improvising that went on. It came about because there was an orchestra and it disbanded, leaving a whole fairly large group of people that wanted to continue playing. And they came to me in September of '81, asked me if I would be their conductor and if when we could do a concert. And I said December, and it wound up being December 7th, which made it an easy day to remember. But that was our first concert. We held it at a school that no longer, it got torn down. It was Cox High School down on Great Neck Road, and it used to sit where the current Great Neck Middle School sits now. When Cox High School was built, it became the Great Neck Middle School, and then they tore it down and built a new one because it was pretty old. It was we played in the auditorium, which was all concrete block and stage and wooden chairs that made a lot of noise, and that was our first concert.
David, speaking of that first concert, I have this binder here that our executive director, Lynette Andrews, lent to me from our office. You might recognize it. I think it was made when you retired or near the end of your tenure to help celebrate those times. And this particular book has from 1981 to 1988, and it's full of newspaper articles, documents from the founding of the orchestra, but it also has here the very first program that you were just talking about. This is from, you said December, right, of 1981?
Yes.
And this is really neat to me, looking at this as a first concert for a community orchestra. And I'm seeing Chopin, the Les Sylphides, the ballet music, and as well as the Boccherini B-flat symphony. But then on the second half, you also have Man of La Mancha. That's It's so interesting. Can you tell us how that first program was put together, and just, you know, even your program philosophy in the early days of this orchestra?
We found, I tried to find music that we could play well and make entertaining to an audience, and music that we could get our hands on. That first concert was paid for by the board members of the orchestra, who are all musicians in the orchestra. And of course, as musicians, we musicians are always broke. So we passed the hat at a board meeting, and that's how we got the money for to print the programs and do what little advertising that we did for that concert. The music I got where I could get it. The late Dennis Zeisler at Old Dominion was a great pal and would lend us music anytime we asked. The Kern Library down in Norfolk had some music, some orchestral music that we borrowed. And we also borrowed some from the Virginia Beach school system, which had some music back in those days, but no orchestra teachers.
Wow. No orchestra teachers in the Virginia Beach public schools.
Well, they had one, Celeste Price.
Wow.
Celeste Price was the one and only. They had four, three of them left, and Celeste was still there, but there were no other teachers and no orchestra teachers and no orchestras in all the high schools. So we
40 years later, look at all the orchestras we have in Virginia Beach and how terrific they are.
Yes. Wow. And those players have been, or those teachers have all helped to bring up the quality of playing in Symphonicity, because most of them are very good players and they want to keep playing. So they've joined the orchestra over the years.
So the Symphonicity back then, which by the way, I mean, we know it now as Symphonicity, but I guess we could be more accurate. What was the actual name of the orchestra when you helped find it?
When we started, we were the Virginia Beach Community Orchestra. And then after 10 years, the players came to me and said, can we change the name? We think we play better than the Community Orchestra moniker suggests. So we became the Virginia Beach Symphony Orchestra. However, that led to a great conflict with the Virginia Symphony. I always like to say our name very clearly defined us. We lived and played in Virginia Beach. We were supported by Virginia Beach, and we played symphony music. The Virginia Symphony sort of took on the name of the entire Commonwealth. And so there was a great conflict in people's minds, who was who. We would often get mail for them. Sometimes their bills, sometimes they'd get our bills. People would be mixed up. They wouldn't know what orchestra they were going to. And like Dwight Davis, who was always a good friend over the years, said, anytime you have Virginia and symphony in the same sentence, people think of Joanne Folletta. And rightly so. She was the best thing to have in the classical music here in all of Tidewater for the years she was here. So when we moved into the new theater, the Sandler Center, we had a change of names and we became Symphonicity. Interesting and kind of whimsical name, but one that has endured and I think has been accepted by everybody. But many people hold it in some esteem, the name, as well as the orchestra.
It's a unique name. I mean, frankly, throughout my career, many orchestras that I've been around and worked with, I don't recall a name of an orchestra quite like that. You know, normally it's something more conventional, as you described earlier, as the Virginia Beach Symphony. So Symphonicity is unique, and putting city and the symphony kind of combination is really interesting. How did that come about?
Well, we knew that we did not want to drop Virginia Beach out of the name. So the name of the orchestra was actually Symphonicity, the Symphony Orchestra of Virginia Beach. So it was a long title, and we just used Symphonicity as the daily name that we used. But on all our letterhead and when we referred to ourselves officially, it was that long name.
Well, I'm reminded that as you were talking about some of this name history, of Joanne Falletta, who of course is just finished a very long tenure with the Virginia Symphony Orchestra, and we wish her well with her future. And I think it was neat that in my first season, I believe my first season here, Joanne was kind enough to reach out to me and send me a welcome gift, welcome me to the area. She was very gracious. She was very warm and supportive about Symphonicity, and even came, as you may recall, to my second concert with the orchestra in November of 2017. We had her as a special guest, and she had very lovely things to say about the performance of the orchestra. But in particular, David, she pointed something out to me that I think is really unique about the orchestra. And I'd like to ask you a little bit more about it, and even going back through the years, how you see this manifest. She remarked that, you know, the musicians really play with a lot of heart. There's just a genuine sense of heart in their playing. And I think a lot of that's because they're volunteering their time, right? They're there because they want to be there. I love the Symphonicity mantra, we play for the love of music, since 1981. I love that because it is so true. Can you expand on that a bit, especially even in the early days when it was all forming out of this love of music, and then how that, you know, developed over the years?
Well, we always vowed to be non-paid for classical music. We also vowed to be self-governing. When
Right.
the orchestra started, it started amidst some controversy, and the players were adamant that they wanted to be self-governing. The city came to us and offered full support to pay for everything and take care of everything. And
Wow.
the players said, no, we want to govern ourselves and call our own shots and make our own way. And so those two things, the self-governing and the all-volunteer, have been the two things that have marked the orchestra as unique in the country. I don't think there's any orchestra like it anywhere in the country, and especially one that has gotten to play so well as a volunteer orchestra. There are some volunteer orchestras like the Chicago Civic Symphony, which are really good. That's a feeder orchestra for the Chicago Symphony, but they don't play pops concerts, and they don't support the community the way we do. And so we're really very unique in that aspect, that we play for nothing. The people that are there because they want to be, and no one there is trapped by paycheck. You know, some people, I have known people that have put in the years and years and years and hours and money and study and lessons, and found out after all of that, sitting, you know, in the back of a string section in a professional orchestra isn't exactly what they wanted to do. But they were sort of trapped by the salary and the time and the investment they'd made. None of our players are like that. They're free to go anytime they want, and that's always been a good thing. Besides good for them, it's always been good for me, because I knew that if I made them mad and they went home, I would no longer have a job.
You know, David, isn't, you know, as conductors, and for our listening and viewing audience, this might be harder to relate to, but as conductors, we know just how delicate that is, right? We're used to situations, though, where the construct of the groups we work with is a little different in terms of the formal commitments that everyone has made, that even if there is some disagreement, you know, you still show up the next day and get to work. And in fact, and I want to come back to this point, but in fact, I want to point out that you and I have a similar background in our professional music making career, as you were with the Navy bands. Is that right? One of the conductors with Navy bands?
Yes.
And I, of course, with the Air Force, and still in the Air National Guard now.
That's a different world. That's a professional world.
But as you say, you know, you and I have also been living in that world, but then here we are on the other side with Symphonicity, and your point about the musician satisfaction is, of course, key. And it's so hard to maintain that while also meeting the expectations of our music-loving patrons as well as our supporters. And, you know, how have you gone about doing that over 35 years and doing it so successfully that you brought Symphonicity into such an era of success?
The early years, I as I said, I would find things that we could play well. We played movements of symphonies rather than full symphonies. and we scattered pop, what's considered pop's music throughout in the first 10 or 15 years. Um, and I talked to the audience. I told them stories about the composers, and I tried once or twice to get technical about it, and I could see that that wasn't something that I should be doing with that audience. So I kept it light and interesting, and they liked it so much that I never could put it down. I could never get away from it. I tried once in one of the last, maybe 3 years before I finished. We did a heavy program, and I didn't say a word. I came out, did the program, took the bows. That was it. Well, I had such a flood of complaints. I even had people accost me in the Farm Fresh parking lot down at the oceanfront and say to me, "What, you don't love us anymore? You mad at us? Were you sick? Why didn't you talk to us?" So I talked to them straight through. Doing that, I never got around to doing what you do, which is the half-hour pre-concert lecture, which is a good thing, and it's something that should be done. I probably should have tried harder to do it myself, but that's just something I never got to.
Well, I like to think I've been following in your footsteps. As you noticed, I'm a little bit of a talker in some of the concerts as well. I like to keep it, conversational, keep it more relaxing, that we're all there together to spend a Sunday afternoon because we want to be there just to enjoy each other's time and music. So I think it's neat that there is that continuation of some of that expectation that you helped set. And then I just naturally, I guess, am similar. And I'd like to say a little bit more about that, Dave, because I don't know how much you're aware of this either, but Symphonicity and what you helped create here. You mentioned earlier that you think it's very unique on a national level, and I'd have to agree. When I was in the active duty Air Force with the Premier Band and Orchestra up in Washington, D.C. in 2016, I was considering a change from that full-time active duty work into more of a balance of civilian military life, which I have now because I'm in the Air National Guard and I'm one of the band conductors for the Air National Guard. But I get to be a civilian too, which is very nice. But when I was looking to make that change, I had a pretty good career going and the job was going quite well. So as I looked around at different opportunities, there were about 33 different conductor jobs being advertised at the time that I was looking. And I looked at them all, and for this reason or that reason, it just I didn't think it'd be a suitable alternative to the very good situation I was in. But then I read about Symphonicity, and it really struck me. The things that leaped out at me, number one, was in the job description for the conductor audition. It actually pointed out how fiscally responsible the orchestra had been in its 35-year history, having never been in the red. And that was phenomenal. Most orchestras have a more difficult time with that. That was amazing. And then to read about the Maestro, David S. Kunkel, who was leading the orchestra. That's you, of course, and your military background I thought was neat. The kind of crossover that you had into the orchestra world, along with some of your board members, which also included members of the military community. I felt like I could maybe fit in that. And then it's just the fact that when you look at Symphonicity, which we know is just a community orchestra, as I often remind people, because it's hard to believe that sometimes when you see what we can do, you also realize we're more than just a community orchestra, because what I learned about when applying for the position was this beautiful concert hall that you call home at the Sandler Center for the Performing Arts, this terrific professional staff and a professional board. I mean, this is tremendous, a really healthy budget, great support from the city of Virginia Beach and beyond. It's really astounding. And then these musicians, their quality of what they can do through their passion. Many of them, as you mentioned, are excellent teachers, and some do all kinds of other sorts of jobs, and yet they are fantastic musicians. I mean, it's just, I don't know of anything else like it. And when I read this, I thought, that right there, if I could have a shot, I'd like to try. And I did, and here I am, and now I can bond with you in a sense and sharing, I think, our love for Symphonicity and these very unique attributes. So tell me more then about the board side of it, like the business side. How did that evolve over the years, and what role did you play?
Well, for many years we were all players in the orchestra, and then we gradually added some non-players, but they weren't professional people. They weren't the kinds of professional people who can bring in money the way you need to have eventually. They were just people interested in the orchestra and wanting to help out. And God bless them. I mean, they served, some of them served as president of the board and worked very hard. But eventually, I knew from the beginning that we would not be able to get any kind of corporate support until we had some professional board members, because professional companies wouldn't give money to an artist generally. They will give money to someone on the board of an arts organization who they know and who they know will shepherd the money carefully and be a good steward of the money. Artists don't have a good track record for doing that. So even though you and I may have equal right and left brains and could probably handle the money very, very well, we're still not going to get any from the people who have it to give. So we had to move towards a professional board, which we did in the last 10 or so years. And that's what you inherited, an all professional board.
And they've been really terrific. Again, having that kind of support behind a community orchestra is unusual, but it has been, instrumental in our success. And right now we are led aptly by the wonderful and generous Dr. Edwin K. Brown, who many may know formerly from the superintendent's office of the Virginia Beach Public Schools way back. And that connection.
He was an arts and humanities commissioner too, many, many years ago. I knew Ed a long, long time ago, back in the day.
It's really neat.
It was good he got on the board, and now I see he's president. That's good.
And to one of your points earlier, right now assisting him as our vice president is a musician in the orchestra, Marguerite Alley, who many know is an outstanding award-winning educator in Virginia Beach Public Schools and throughout the region as a cellist. She's a great player. She plays a lot of string instruments. We just made a video recently. She was playing the upright bass. But even that combination right there of Margaret Alley and Dr. Edwin Brown, that business education community side with the musician educator, that's part of the energy from the board. And they're surrounded with wonderful people from all different corners of our city and our region, from different disciplines, different businesses. We're so grateful to have them. And you mentioned corporate sponsorship. It's really grown, as you know, over the years. And under your tenure, you ended up getting really one of the biggest first major corporate sponsors with PRA Group, which they've been phenomenal. We're so grateful. Can you tell us more about those beginnings? And then just in general, how do you feel about the need for support in the arts from our business community?
Well, PRA came on board when as the company grew, and Sue Gruby came on as our piccolo player, and so she was instrumental in getting them to be a leadership group. And then she was also able to go to other companies and say, look, PRA is here doing this, and my husband and I personally are donating this way, and we encourage you to do the same. You can look at the orchestra's track record of fiscal responsibility and always finishing in the black, never overspending, never ever had a credit line. And that's encouraging for people to do. The orchestra puts bodies in the seats in Sandler Center, which helps support that place. And they go out, you see them. One of my last concerts, I went to McCormick and Schmidt, which is no longer there, unfortunately. And everybody in there had been to the concert. There was not one table of anybody who hadn't been to the concert. Most of the people I recognized, but the ones I didn't, I could see they had programs on their table, or they said something to me when I walked by. But the whole restaurant was filled with people who had been to the concert. And the same is true for the other restaurants in the area. It's very important to the city that theater is busy and Symphonicity does a good job of playing their part.
Well, it's really been coming along, beautifully in that regard, and we have a great relationship with Town Center. We've done some really special things. Last year, we did a movie to music concert, and we've got other plans that we're looking at to the future. But in all the 40 years that you've been with the orchestra, and its different name changes and some different board members and so forth, who were some of the outstanding contributors that you really enjoyed working with, or you felt really made a big impact on Symphonicity's development?
Musicians?
Well, either both musicians and some of the board support that you had, or maybe board presence you worked with. Anyone in particular you'd like to recognize?
No, I wouldn't single any of them out. I really wouldn't. They've all, each president has brought something to her own way of doing it, and it's always worked out to our advantage.
David, who was the first board president? Do you recall that?
Yeah, Frank Jones.
Frank Jones. He plays flute in the orchestra still.
Yeah, he's still there.
Wow.
Yeah, he was the first board president, and then the late Lee Wales was the second. He had been the band director at Norview High School, and then he went off. He was Prince William a music guy for the whole Prince William school system. And it was through him that we had a young artist come and play cello, a young artist named Zool Bailey.
Oh, of course.
Zool played with us twice before.
I played with him with the Roanoke Symphony back when I lived out there years back.
Yeah, now he's all big and famous. And
that's terrific. So we had some folks on the internet that knew we were going to do this interview, and they had some questions. I've already asked a couple of them, but here's one that I'm sure won't surprise you. And that is, did you have any favorite programs, any big, or at least big highlights that you really remember fondly musically that you've done with Symphonicity over the 40 years?
There were a lot of them. You cannot stand in front of an orchestra and listen to a Tchaikovsky symphony play out in front of you and not be affected by that. You can't stand in front of an orchestra playing the Pines of Rome, the Pines of the Appian Way. I mean, you just can't not be affected by that. We also did Janacek's Sinfonietta with all of its bass trumpets and 12 trumpet players and 2 euphoniums and on and on and on.
Wow.
The first Beethoven Ninth with the Sister Cities concert back in 2003. And probably my most favorite piece of music of all that I did was the Duraflight Requiem. I love that piece of music. I just did it last March with my choir at church. I thoroughly enjoyed the orchestra not liking it as we rehearsed it until the chorus came in, and then they all said, wow.
Oh, yeah.
They all, once they heard that amazing work, and it's just, there's no other work like it. So that lasted a long time with me.
That's very special. And it's actually a great segue into another question I wanted to ask you about, which is the Symphonicity chorus. It makes such a difference, and we're thankful to have it. And of course, that very special memory is tied to the fact that we have a chorus. But can you walk us through how that came about in Symphonicity's history?
Yeah, the one that exists now is the third try at it. The first one fell by the wayside. I made that one up in about 1983. And we did the St. Cecilia Mass by Gounod. It lasted for a while, and then it sort of went away. Then I used 2 high school choruses for a number of years and did pieces that young voices sounded good doing. Things, classical piece, the Beethoven Choral Fantasia works really good with young voices. And we did some things like, the Song of Democracy, and we did the Poulenc Gloria with the young voices. And then they did
myself.
Yeah, they did some Christmas concerts with us. So, and then the one that exists now came together for the Sister Cities concert, and after the concert, the local singers that participated said, we want to stay together. And so the orchestra took on the project, and they're still going now.
Oh, we're grateful. We've got a very strong chorus, as you know, and last year, this past season, we just did John Rutter's Gloria, which is beloved by many, and I'm sure you've done that also at church, perhaps over the years. And then the year before that was Verdi's Requiem, 90-minute epic experience for the chorus and the orchestra, which I think was really truly a milestone in our growth and continuing what you helped establish, and not only through your career, but specifically with the chorus and orchestra, such as the first time you did Beethoven's Ninth. Incidentally, my first season here, we also did Beethoven's Ninth Symphony, and that was in February of 2018. And John Campbell from the Art Song Review, I think you know John pretty well, and
yes.
He wrote up a nice review about our performance. But I thought it was neat that he kind of referenced the fact that he had reviewed Beethoven's Ninth previously when the orchestra performed it years earlier, and was simply commenting how it's remarkable that the orchestra even then, attempted it, let alone back when you did it maybe in 2003. But he's remarked that the orchestra continues to grow and take on that just incredible masterpiece. So, for me to see, I get to step into it, David, and go, wow, this is great, but you helped build it. I mean, that's tremendous, David. It's tremendous. The whole city, the whole community is just so grateful to you, and to all those who helped lead the way. Right now, you may know we have Dr. Nancy Klein, who is our course master from Oldham University. She's really been terrific. But I know you've worked with others over the years, and other musicians and other leaders. Any other soloists or special, events? You mentioned like the Sister Cities. Can you tell us more about that? Anything like that you want to talk about?
Soloist Tom Pandolfi.
Oh, yes. You brought Thomas to us, and
I did.
Great.
Tom won a concerto contest that I judged that was held in Virginia Beach. And I asked him if he'd come and do a recital at my church, and he said he would. He was finishing up his master's degree at Juilliard. And then at that concert, the recital, I asked him if he'd play with the orchestra, and he said, sure. So we did the Grieg piano concerto, and his mom and dad came down, and we met them, my wife and I, and became friends with them, and of course friends with Tom. And Tom and I ran through a lot of concertos over the years, and some truly unusual ones. The James Bond concerto was one that he brought to us, so we did. I had him do the Rodrigo Heroic Concerto, which nobody does. We did the MacDowell, which isn't really mainstream, but it's certainly higher level than the James Bond Concerto. Another soloist who I love dearly is Tanya Anisimova, cello player, a woman that I've known her and her husband ever since she first came to play, and she's a great musician. I hope you find a way to have her. You'll enjoy her. You'll enjoy working with her. And I guess the other one would be Irina Mirashanu. She's come, and I enjoyed working with her. Very good player. And of course, our own Annika. I can't leave Annika out. To watch her develop over the years has been a real treat. So I think those are the ones that come to mind immediately.
Well, of those four, and I know there's others, but of those four, I've been grateful to work with two of them. Thomas, incidentally, I met when I was a candidate and not here yet. I was up in Alexandria, Virginia, and at a concert up there with the Alexandria Symphony. And Thomas Pandolfi was the soloist for the world premiere of the American Concerto by Kim Allen Kluge, who was at the time the music director, and he was the composer. It's a really interesting work, and very, more sort of a crossover, contemporary-ish kind of, not really popish, but, it was cinematic, symphonic, and yeah. Thomas, has that versatility, and he really brought the house down with it. So I said to Thomas, I went up to him at that concert and said, you did a fantastic job. By the way, here's who I am, and I happen to be a candidate for this orchestra in Virginia Beach that I noticed on your schedule you will be performing there in a few months with David Kunkel. And of course, he raved about you and the orchestra. And I said, listen, I don't know how this is going to shake out, but if I ever win that job, I'm bringing you down right away. And we're going to do that concerto. And we did. And it was great. And then Thomas has since been back this past year to world premiere Piece by Polo Piatti, and we just love him. And so thank you, David, for that. And
there's two other locals that I really should mention, and that's husband and wife team, Andrei Kasparov and his wife Oksana Lutitian. They both played with us several
times. They're at
times.
ODU, right? Is that, I believe they're still, are they teaching there?
Yeah. Andre is, I think he teaches composition, and he's he's the leader of the Norfolk Chamber Consort, and Oksana teaches Governor's School and ODU, and she's a church musician. They're both church musicians as well. They both played solo things, and they played Mendelssohn Concerto for two pianos with us, and they may have done Carnival of the Animals with us years ago. So they're another couple that enrich this community and are generous with their time. Just really good people.
You mentioned Annika Jenkins earlier, and she performed with us this past year as well, as you may recall, when she came out to, as actually a little more than a year ago, she came and did the Mozart G major third violin concerto, and everyone that knows her knows about this story about her and the orchestra and the Sandler Center and playing for the council. And can you elaborate on that? What role did you play in all that? Such a fascinating story.
The city tore down the Pavilion Theater, which was where we played and where Virginia Musical Theater was. They promised that they wouldn't tear it down until they had a new theater in place, but they didn't do that. So the time came for a vote for a new theater, and about that time Annika went down to city council with a jug full of money that she collected from her friends, and she made an impassioned plea for them to vote for the new theater, and then she played for them. The Mayor Myra asked us to get active in letting people know that they needed to contact those city council members and have them change their mind. And that's exactly what happened. There's a newspaper, which I imagine is in the office there. If not, I have a copy of it. That came out the next day, and all of those people on the council who were going to vote no said they could not vote no. They had to vote yes because of the pressure they'd gotten through emails and letters and personal phone calls. They got it from school kids. They got it from, we had people go to all of the flower clubs and the hospital auxiliary and all those sorts of groups, and all the businesses at Town Center that weren't yet opened. Sue Grooveby went around to all of those businesses and said, if you want to have a theater to help fill your restaurant, you need to get busy and convince city council. And it all worked. It all worked. And so we were really instrumental. I don't know any other group that worked as hard as we did, put the time in that we did to get that theater built. And so it was a happy day when we moved in there in November of 2007.
Oh, goodness, I imagine. And David, what was it like to be on stage with your community orchestra in this beautifully constructed new concert hall and performing in the Sandler Center for the Performing Arts? What was that like?
It was great, and it forced us to get better. You can't play in there and be bad. And so everybody stepped up, me included, and we got better at what we were doing. It also was fun to bring artists in who had never been there and have them come in and watch their mouth drop when they see this little old community volunteer orchestra playing in this magnificent hall with its superb acoustics. I mean, it's just wonderful.
And playing well, I might add, yes.
Yeah, so it was a really great thing.
I think the Sandler Center in many ways inspires our musicians, and
Yeah,
it helps
yeah, it
recruit
does.
even. The players want to be in the orchestra just to have the opportunity to perform in
Yeah,
there, and they want to play well when they're in there. And it's just a great marriage. It is.
yeah.
Thank you, and to all that were involved in making it possible.
Well, a lot of it goes to the late Meyer Obendorf, who was mayor and who loved the orchestra, loved the Virginia Musical Theater, loved the Virginia Beach Chorale, all those volunteers. She was very proud of the volunteerism in the city, and she was a great leader for 20 years. And we owe a lot to her. Those of us that were around back in those days and who are still here to enjoy what the city has become.
Well, as we look ahead to the future, David, we start with the number 40 this year. Um, what's it like when you hear that with this orchestra that you helped start in 1981, that we're at 40 now? And what do you think is in store for the future? What should we be looking forward to or trying to change or evolve toward?
Get rid of this COVID business and get back to making music.
That's for sure.
I see no reason why the orchestra can't get right back to it when this is over. I think it's a great thing that the orchestra plays down at the oceanfront. I think it's a sad thing they don't do 4th of July anymore. I have talked to at least one city council member about that Symphonicity ought to be back to that 4th of July. It added a certain air of class to the city to have a symphony orchestra down there on the 4th of July playing for all those people and doing what orchestras do on the 4th of July, that kind of music, pops music, and then 1812 and Stars and Stripes. And it's just a really great thing to have. And the concerts that you do up at the Hilton, it's an important thing. And I'm glad Symphonicity is still a part of that.
Definitely. And I know about that history and some of the unique projects you've done over the years with the 4th of July concerts and the other collaborations with the Aviation Museum and Pungo and other POPs events. And so as we look to the future, we certainly want to keep embracing those opportunities. We've been very fortunate with the support from the city. They've just been terrific. And I think there's a lot of opportunity out there for us to grab onto. So we're gonna keep trying, David, to do all we can to live up to the potential that you helped instill in Symphonicity. Well, my friend, this has been really neat. Thank you so much for taking the time to share with me today, but with also our whole community through this virtual experience that we're having this year in our 40th anniversary.
Glad to be able to do it, and good luck. And I hope that you'll be back to rehearsing, and I'll come to a Tuesday night rehearsal and listen to y'all.
Absolutely. David, you're always welcome as our music director emeritus. We love you and appreciate you so much. We thank everybody for joining us today. And remember, we've got 39 more individuals to interview throughout the year to talk about their love for Symphonicity and the role that they've played. So we appreciate everyone joining us today. And be sure to visit us at symphonicity.org to learn about the new ways that we're going to safely experience music making throughout the city of Virginia Beach this year in a new season we're calling Symphonicity in the City. And David, we certainly hope that we'll catch you around town as we do. Thanks so much.
You will. Thank you.